One of the biggest impediments to healing is the sense of injustice that these relationships evoke. They are unfair. Narcissistic people get away with so much. There are very few consequences for their behavior. They don't care about hurting other people. They're often rewarded by society, and you are left holding the bag. So you're not going to ever be able to play a narcissistic person's ground game, so don't even try that at home, kids. So have you ever watched a bully and a regular person get into a fight? Not even a physical fight, just a yelling fight. So the bully is willing to scream and humiliate and yell and say really awful things and do some really low blows. They might make fun of a person's appearance, their gender, their race, and in a short period of time, really try to shame and break someone down. When people do that to us or really come at us, we often get agitated and start turning up our own volume. We may go on the attack. The bully will get louder, may escalate, say meaner things. They may even laugh at us. So in a way, when we try to play their ground game, they get stronger. It's supply for them. Narcissistic people are antagonistic, so they're built to fight. They feel entitled to say and do what they want. They feel entitled to the thing they are fighting for, whether it's a parking spot or to get into your lane of traffic or to cheat on you or to take your money. And they don't have empathy. Then you throw some insecurity in on top of that and their need for power and dominance and control to offset that insecurity. And I promise you this, you are in for one hell of a fight. For the smallest things sometimes, like I said, like that parking spot or that spot in line, they will have no problem raising their voice or humiliating you and shaming you, but it doesn't work in reverse. We've all been here. In fact, when there is that kind of injustice, someone taking something, for example, that is clearly not theirs, and feeling that they have a right to, or putting other people at risk, or just being mean, and someone is coming at us, that sympathetic nervous system of ours kicks in. And at those times, even if it's not our go-to, even some of the mild-mannered people amongst us may summon up a fight response. And it doesn't work. If you get into a fight with a narcissist, it's what they want. It's why they bait. I live in Los Angeles, which is a car culture, and people are really mean on the road. There have also been some horrific examples on the Southern California roadways of what seemed like narcissistic people shooting and killing people because someone cut them off in traffic or got mad at them, or maybe because the other driver honked at them for cutting them off. It's not worth it, folks. If someone is driving erratically, give them a wide berth. There's a lot of research showing that narcissistic people are significantly more dangerous drivers. And narcissistic people are also dysregulated. So yes, they may shoot you or use their car as a weapon. And then after you're dead, give some BS nonsense afterwards after how they just got angry and they didn't mean it. Well, by then you're injured or dead. So their lame apology, which is really meant to lessen their sentence, won't do you much good, would it? Someone cuts you off in traffic, pull back, don't engage, and if they keep harassing or following you, find a police or fire station to drive to have them follow you to, and then stay there, and then pay attention and make sure you are not followed home. Sadly, this is the world we live in. Gotta love the narcissist for that one. Nobody's ever going to do anything about the narcissistic people's behavior until they do something that escalates to the level of danger. And by then, it's often too late. Anyhow, that's a more extreme example. But when people come at us, maybe not even like raging at us in traffic, we want to put them in their place. That's natural. And we can even take this down a notch to people who are behaving cruelly and manipulatively in the workplace, or friends who engage in smear campaigns, or family members who spread malicious gossip and lies, or may even humiliate and shame you in front of the family. You may want to scream back or do your own smear campaign. You want them to taste their poison. It doesn't work. It's not that they are immune to it, but they like a dirty fight. And they will always out-dirty fight you. Some of this relates to something that narcissistic people can do, but most people who are not narcissistic cannot, which is to have two very different faces and switch between them quickly. For a regular person, if you have an emotion, sadness, worry, anger, it doesn't turn on and off, and others may notice it, even if you're trying to cover it up. And again, we may not even want people to see it. For example, we may not want a stranger or someone at work to know that we're sad or upset. But when we are really deeply experiencing emotion, we just may not be able to turn it off. But we try, but how we look to others is such a motivator for us, but we can't. But we may clean up. We may even be able to get into a numbed space, but not so much a performative, how can I look like everything's great space? Narcissistic people can go from charming to abusive in like 5 seconds. It's really quite remarkable to witness. So as the fight you're having with them gets ickier and dirtier, they can do it and still be able to appear charming to others, and then turn on their collective gaslighting muscle and paint you out as the problem, or they play the victim. Most of us can't do this. So as a result, they can fight dirty, play the victim, get the support of other people, and make it look like you're the problem. Now, this can often play out in intimate relationships where you are tired of them being shady or deceitful, or you want them to know what it feels like after they cheat on you or flirt or are inappropriate with other people. You want them to know how bad that feels. You want to outplay them. And you may say, oh, I'm going out with my friends tonight, and you look like $1,000,000. And then you post, maybe you post a social media image that may attract lots of compliments, or even keep talking about how someone at work has been noticing you, or someone in the coffee shop noticed you. You may even wish you could do what they do and get supply from someone else, just so they could watch this all happen and know what it feels like, but you can't. You may even feel a little guilty about the social media post, or when someone tries to buy you a drink on that night you look good and you're out with your friends. Or you may backpedal from talking about that person at work, or you can't imagine cheating, not because you are protective of the narcissistic person per se, but because you have empathy and you don't want to do this to someone. And they don't have empathy, so they're not noticing. They're just viewing it, and they get into a jealous rage perspective. You may even do it just to feel something after being treated so badly for so long. But many people will say, I tried this, but it didn't feel right to me. It may just be a way station for you after the desolation of the narcissistic relationship. However, I promise you, you cannot beat them at their own game because it just doesn't work that way. You want something that they can't do. You want to be seen, respected, regarded, heard. You want to feel and be treated like a human being. Now, the road rage bullies, they're not in your life. So obviously that's easy. Just don't engage and give them a wide berth. And have the sad realization that somewhere out there is a very sad and abused spouse or kids or family or coworkers of this horrible person driving this car. But you don't have to engage. In your own life, it's the frustration and the awareness that you aren't playing the same game. Compassion, collaboration, balance, that's not what they're doing. They're playing a selfish power and dominance game riddled with entitlement. So what do we learn from all of this? Stop trying to play their game. Certainly not going to beat them at it. I'm not even convinced any of us can play it. Don't engage. Drive away. Have compassion for yourself. Because when we get pulled into their mud, not only do we not win, but it could potentially be dangerous, and we certainly often feel bad afterwards. That empathy comes back to bite us. Bring the best of yourself to the good people in your life. You're never going to be able to out-dirty play a narcissistic person, and for most of us, our lives aren't political campaigns or hostile takeovers. Our lives are our lives. Your narcissistic partner or colleague or family member is motivated by something very different than you. And you won't win by trying to be like them, and nor can you win at this idea of doing what they do so they can see how you feel. For that maneuver to work, for them to watch what they do to you and say, ooh, that's not very nice, I better stop. That would require so much self-awareness and empathy that if they had that, then they're not narcissistic and you wouldn't be in this mess in the first place. Never try to outplay a bully. It will always, always come back at you. You were in a relationship with a narcissist. You break up. It was awful. Do you tell the narcissist's new partner and try to warn them about what they've just gotten into? Yes or no? Drop that in the comments. I want to hear what you have to say about this. Do you warn the new boyfriend or girlfriend? Okay, so hope take a minute to do that because I'm going to answer this question. Dr. Ramani says no. So let's be honest about this, okay? I know you're all lovely because you've been through a narcissistic relationship and you're still standing. You're a hero in my book. But your motivation for this isn't entirely in the right place. Part of it is I'm going to mess their stuff up. I'm going to mess my narcissist stuff up, right? And I'm going to make sure that I'm going to break this relationship and this person needs to know, and then this person will break up with them, and my ex-narcissist will be abandoned, and won't that be great? Yeah, I get that. I absolutely get that. And I know that there's a second, probably even bigger piece for many people, or that I want to warn someone. I don't want someone else to go through this. This is awful. You know, I want to run an educational campaign, and I've said this before on this YouTube channel. There is no such thing as Yelp for people, where you can write reviews. I mean, you can do it for restaurants, ironically, but you can't do it for people. Can you imagine Yelp for people? You go online and say, oh my gosh, don't date this guy. Love bombing that went through week 3 and then da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And we can't do it. We have, defamation laws against that. So you don't have that opportunity. So I'm sure there are both your intentions for wanting to tell the new partner of the narcissist about them has both good and not so healthy intentions. But here's the reason why, and you already know the answer to this. Go back to the early days of your relationship with the narcissist. Go back. Especially if you were in more of a traditional grandiose love bombing one, and even if you were in more of a covert, I want to get to know you, I've had such a hard life, and here you are, gosh, no one's ever understood me, but I want to get to know you, kind of emulating kind of narcissist relationship. Regardless of which way it went for you, in those early weeks and even early months, if an ex-partner came up to you and tried to warn you against this person, what would you have thought? Many of you would have thought, my narcissist has already told me their ex is crazy, because let me tell you this, I can trust me on this one, the narcissist you recently ended your relationship is telling the next person you're crazy. I promise you that, okay? So that new narcissistic relationship, that new person you got into a relationship, you may not even know they're a narcissist yet, obviously, has told you their ex is absolutely, completely out of their mind, that they are a bad person, they're vengeful, they're out to get them. They really frame it as that person is completely deviant. And because you're sort of caught up in the love bombing and in a new relationship, you believe the narcissist. Well, I'm with them now. And there's also that sort of strange territoriality we tend to have in new relationships, right? Like, this person chose me, and that person also wants them. That classical triangulation dynamic, which for most people goes back to childhood, of that idea that you like the idea that you want. It's the Oedipal conflict kind of, brought to adult life, that you get to have the new person, and the old person doesn't get to have the person, actually plays on a really primal thing. You really want to pay attention to that. When the old partner is sort of floating in the background and your new partner's talking about them like, they're demeaning them and diminishing them a lot, because they're going to do it to you when your relationship's done. Now, listen, a lot of us might be quite open about about an ex with a new partner and say, it wasn't a healthy relationship. Let me just leave it at that. And then shut the door on it. And it may not be till years later or quite a bit later that you do really speak about that relationship. But if that ex is kind of lurking there and they're talking about them in that way, and that ex came up to you and said, you know what, I'm really warning you, do not get involved with this guy or this gal. Like, it was a nightmare relationship. The odds are you would not only not listen, you would double down on your assumption that there was something wrong with the ex. So if you call the new partner of your narcissist, what are they going to think of you? Exactly the same thing. They're not going to say, oh, thank you so much for telling me. They're going to say, step off. Get away. Like, you still want them? Well, you can't have them. They chose me. They're going to go through that same triangulated stickiness you went through. All right? So you get this. It's actually incredibly painful to know that somebody is about to go through what you went through. It's like watching slow motion a train hit a wall. For some of you, though, there may even be an unresolved sort of jealousy. As much as these relationships are toxic and awful and difficult and dehumanizing, that cognitive dissonance, that trauma bond, it's like a magic magnet that kind of keeps sucking you back in, even where every wise part of your brain is saying, run away. The idea that they're now, you have a fantasy, right? The fantasy is that this new person is going to get a better version of them. I've always said it. There is no better version of them. There's just Narcissist 1.0. It never evolves past that, okay? So this new person is going to go through what you went through. But it's very painful, especially in the era of social media, to watch the narcissist put their brand new courtship all over the place. This is us at the beach. Look at us kissing through our masks. We are falling in love. I have never known such a love. This is my soulmate. Blah, blah, blah. It hurts. That's an easy fix. Turn those people off your social media. Off, 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 off. That's mouse clicks, okay? You just need to be disciplined enough to do it. But don't try to encroach in it. Now, sometime down the line, it's quite possible that new partner may reach out to you when this relationship starts hitting the rocks and saying, what have I gotten myself into? I can't tell you how many times I have worked with survivors of really severe narcissistic relationships. In these cases, these were often marriages and there were kids and it was messy and there was money and all of that. And in some of these cases, and it was really illuminating, they were told, so think about, there's a person, perfectly nice person, marries a very narcissistic person. They get married, they go through their whole, and the narcissistic person was married before, all right? The narcissist tells the new partner, my ex, absolutely obsessive, completely off, terrible person. I'm traumatized by this awful person. New person believes the narcissist. They get married, they have a marriage. Narcissist being a narcissist, the marriage falls apart, okay? So now, the person in that relationship's like, golly. And they reach out to the ex, in this case it was an ex-wife, okay? And the ex-wife, there's not that woman is as sane, as sober as you could imagine. Actually a lovely person who carries all the rigors of narcissistic abuse. And you realize that the story, that woman in that relationship with that narcissistic man realizes she was sold a lie all along. This monstrous ex-wife was not a monster, was actually a really nice person who got destroyed by this relationship. And so it was, and at that point, they shared strategy, got some insight on how to approach a divorce and all of that. But for you, there may be down the line that moment when your narcissist's new relationship goes on the rocks, and maybe then the partner reaches out to you. But do not ever reach out to them. If they reach out to you and ask for honest answers, be careful. Be very, very careful. Because I'll be frank with you. They may very well, as you know how the trauma bond works, they may slide right back into the relationship with the narcissist and then say, hey, I talked to your ex and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It ain't worth it. My only goal for you is that your job is not to be the advocate for every sorry person who decides to get into the relationship with a narcissist. That's their lesson to learn. Listen, the only way your kid learns to add, subtract, or read is because they learn how to do it. You can't learn it for them. It's the same thing with all the people who are going to get into this new relationship with this narcissist. This is their painful lesson to learn. It ain't your job to stop them from it. So your only job is to create distance and boundaries and clarity, and that ultimate goal I have for everyone, utter indifference to that narcissist. And the best way to achieve that is to have as much distance as you can get. And it's not always easy, for example, if there's shared kids and shared families, but still to get as much distance as you can get, both physical and psychological distance from that narcissist. And that means not getting into the mud with new partners. Clean up that social media, block the people who post stuff about their relationship. If people bring it up, respectfully turn it away. It was very interesting. Recently, someone was asking me, hey, do you want to hear about da-da-da-da-da, your ex-partner? And it wasn't either here nor there. And I said, no, I actually don't. Because I was completely indifferent to what had happened in this person's life. And I realized that I really did not care. I didn't even have a curiosity about it. I was like, oh, you go, Ramani. It is about indifference. And so I think that if you can keep that in mind, that the goal is indifference, you won't muck around and try to teach the new partner of your narcissist sort of the way out. Now, I'd love to hear from any of you. If any of you have ever gone through this, was it worth it? Because I'm sure some of you actually did reach out to the new partner. Did it work out? Did it not work out? Like I said, in general, I say don't do it, because as much as you might think your intentions are clear, some of them are probably not healthy for you. The sooner you can get distance between you and that narcissist and everyone who has anything to do with that person, the healthier it's going to be for you. So if you are in a narcissistic relationship, now especially if the relationship ends and then the narcissist is the one who ends it, I can guarantee that you're going to have obsessive thoughts of vindictiveness. Plan on it. And this will be 1,000 times more compelling if they left you for someone else. Now, most pointedly, if it's a romantic relationship, you may ruminate about their new relationship failing, or who is this new person, and you might even have this fantasy about their relationship failing or something bad happening to your ex. These are thoughts, and they're thoughts you can't get out of your head. You may ruminate about things about like the narcissistic person in your life, they lose their job or they're publicly shamed. If it's a workplace situation or a business associate and the thing falls apart, you may ruminate about them failing or having to, face the IRS or something. You dream of the day that they're arrested or that they go bankrupt. The challenge is that many survivors of narcissistic abuse are really empathic people. So you all struggle with having such overwhelming vindictive feelings. So I've had people say to me, I know, I'm such an evil person, but I would love it if someone stole his motorcycle. I'm like, well, you got to up your definition on evil, right? And then survivors will say, God, I'm not the same kind of vindictive as the narcissist, am I? I'd actually argue that these are different flavors of vindictiveness. And this is where that insight from that conversation and looking into the family systems literature gives us some thoughts. Narcissistic vindictiveness is domination-oriented. It's a way for them to show the other person or people or the world at large who's boss, to put fear in other people, to exercise a sense of menace, like you better watch your back, or I'm lawyering up, or I know everyone in this town, don't you? Psh, you won't ever be able to go anywhere again, that kind of thing. It's all an extension of power and control. The narcissists maintain the grandiose idea that nobody can cross them and get away with it. They get an almost sadistic glee from the idea of punishing someone, and they defend against their narcissistic fragility and their vulnerability through being vindictive. But another function of vindictiveness is an attempt to be heard. And this is especially true for people who have experienced emotional abuse or narcissistic abuse, or simply a lack of empathy or just neglect in relationships. This function of vindictiveness can happen whether the relationship with the narcissist is over or not. In a narcissistic relationship, you are not seen or heard unless they need you for something, or you do something that rocks their world and gets their notice, and that can include vindictiveness. The vindictiveness, in whatever form it takes, It becomes a way for a person in a narcissistic relationship to be seen or heard, because now you're speaking their language. Their language doesn't include empathy or compassion or kindness or goodness, but vindictiveness, yeah, that's a language they know. Sometimes that vindictive action by you is the first time in a long time that the narcissistic person may drop what they're doing and look up long enough to notice what it is you're doing. And then, of course, when they recognize that it's vindictive, they completely lose their minds and come back at you with double the fierceness and revenge. But they will notice. And the hypothesis is then that if you take on the vindictiveness, basically that narcissistic posturing, that you learn, that's what's getting me heard. But that vindictiveness in you, that feeling, it does something else. You're trying to tick those boxes of addressing injustice. Your vindictive gesture may not set it all right. It may not even set it a little right, but it may help. One of the biggest impediments to healing is the sense of injustice that these relationships evoke. They are unfair. Narcissistic people get away with so much. There are very few consequences for their behavior. They don't care about hurting other people. They're often rewarded by society, and you are left holding the bag. Their toxic behavior, although it is devastating your life, is not against the law per se in many cases, so there are often few legal remedies. The narcissists also seem to live forever, and everyone else is getting sick from the stress-induced health conditions that they get from having to deal with them. And then there's another even more subtle point. When people go through narcissistic abuse, they often find they are not able to get through to other people, to fully have other people understand what they've been through, right? They will tell, if you're a survivor, you will recall people minimizing your experience of narcissistic abuse. People just have different styles, right? And sometimes, and this may not even be vindictive, but some survivors will almost take a little bit of relief when a person who didn't believe you is facing or is about to face a narcissistically abusive situation. Not because you want them to suffer, but because now you think that maybe they'll get it. Survivors can feel almost desperate to have the people around them get it. And they recognize that sometimes almost wishing a bad circumstance on someone is the only way they will get it. So the idea of feeling or even behaving vindictively as a way, even if this relationship is ostensibly over, to finally be heard may be part of the vindictive process that many survivors experience. You know damn well I am not a fan of vindictive behavior. I don't think it's good for you. But I am the first one to experience a slight bit of justice when I see a narcissistic person finally get their due. I am just never going to be a believer of someone initiating that vindictive set of dominoes and making them topple all the way down. I encourage people to take a path of patience, and that the true revenge is that the narcissist has to be the narcissist forever, and you at least have a shot at a genuine and compassionate life. But for folks who are hurting now, who aren't being heard now, that long-term play, it doesn't feel very satisfying. The challenge is that many survivors of narcissistic abuse, people who are good people, who do have empathy, vindictiveness is actually really not in your nature. So to even be thinking that way is foreign to you and can often result in a sense of almost self-punishment because now you see yourself as the bad one. I personally see you as the human one, and in this video want to humanize where those vindictive feelings are coming from. There are so many things that are infuriating about a narcissistic relationship, but foremost is that nothing you do gets you seen or heard in the relationship, and that is an awful feeling. You may feel an escalation in yourself, especially if things that are happening in the relationship feel increasingly unjust, or if the relationship ends or you are betrayed. The vindictiveness, whether through thoughts or actions, may serve to create a sense of justice for you, even though it's hard to get, or just to feel heard. However, while I understand the functionality of it, it gets complicated. You want to be heard, you want justice, I get all of that. The fallout is the bad feeling it leaves in you. Be aware of that. And finally, be very careful. Vindictive behavior carries risks. It can put you in legal peril, and that can include running afoul of criminal laws, slander, defamation, libel, or because the narcissist is simply more litigious and vindictive than you, could also end up costing you tons of money in legal fees. So your vindictiveness in the face, or your feelings of vindictiveness in the face of a narcissist are not abnormal. It can all be all-encompassing and preoccupying, and while it's normal for a while, over time, these feelings do harm you. It pulls you out of your life, and the narcissist is still occupying a lot of space in your head. Talking these feelings out in therapy, engaging in healing work, recognizing that all of these thoughts are normal in light of what you've been through, but also pulling yourself back and avoiding acting on it and slowly taking your life back, that right there is the money shot. The new person in their lives, so if your narcissist left you and to go to someone else, that new person is now stuck with them. There was no winning, but it takes a minute to get there. You will get there. But I have to say, when I've observed people say, I'm not listening to you. I've had friends say, Ramani, and they've been actually very unkind. Like, you can take your self-righteous prattling and go to hell. I am going to get revenge on this person. But when they finally do, they actually feel terrible. They feel sick. It doesn't feel good. I've had people I work with and clinically and whatnot saying, and they roll their eyes at me and say, really? Like, seriously? Have you not been through this? I have. And then they will do it. They'll do what they're going to do. And what happens when they talk about it? I kind of wish I didn't do that. The fantasy is where you get stuck. Like, I will feel better. You think it'll help you feel whole. Every so often we get the miracle where there is the vindictiveness happen, like the juicy thing where the new person almost right away leaves them for someone new, something like that. Like just something that looks bad and it makes them look bad. It's great when it happens. It often doesn't, but anything you could do can often make it worse for you. And then instead of focusing on your healing, you may be dealing with the fallout of this. The vindictive thoughts in your head, normal. You're not a bad person. By acting on it, though, you could end up doing more harm to you than really rocking their world very much at all. And anytime someone does, so often afterwards they'll say, if anything, the satisfaction was short-lived. So I'm gonna put you in the seat. You can be the narcissism expert for a minute. I want you to think of somebody who wants to keep maintaining a relationship with a narcissistic person in her life, like many of us, like me, like all of you. But how does she talk to this person about their narcissistic personality? Drop it in the comments. But I want you to think about how you would advise someone in your life that was experiencing this. Okay, to review that. So there's a person out there, they want to maintain a relationship with a narcissistic person in her life because that person is important to her, and she wants to help that person see their personality. What can she do? What is the best way to introduce the idea of narcissism to a narcissistic person who doesn't know they're narcissistic yet? It's tricky, right? So at a minimum, you got to remember this. You really cannot successfully call a narcissistic person out straight. Some of you believe that if this person recognizes that this is their personality style and could clearly see the damage that they have wrought, and then they can connect the dots, maybe there's hope. I guess it depends on your definition of hope. For some of you, you might be okay if just the narcissistic person could dial down on their rage. Or for some of you, that if they would simply acknowledge the harm that they've done. For others of you, you could be okay if they just be aware that they just don't have empathy even though they think they do. Part of the hope is knowing what your own personal end game is with this person. And in this case, the person who wrote this question, she wanted the narcissistic anger to end. Remember, narcissistic people actually don't love what their anger makes them look like. They don't like, it's not a good brand to be looking unhinged and messy out there. They don't like that. And they kind of hope that after they have one of their tantrums that people will forget about it or will provide a justification or hope you'll justify it for them. I know that there are some of you who may say, it's not ideal and I wish they were empathic, but I'm willing to go with less anger and I can work with that. I was talking with an old friend who was telling me about someone she used to know and who ended up connecting the dots for themselves, okay? The person who was actually no longer in her life reached out after a long time, and they were actually pretty clear how their personality stuff, or at least some of their behavior, messed everything up. Now, my friend said to me, she's like, yeah, I'm kind of happy that this person figured it out, but it doesn't change my story. It didn't change my experience. I was still hurt. Now, sadly, in the vast majority of cases, a narcissistic person typically has to hit rock bottom, lose really important stuff in their life, before they're actually willing to critically look at how the puzzle pieces may actually connect and how their behavior may have affected other people. The tough part of that is that you just explaining stuff to them is probably not going to be enough. It may literally require your relationship with them ending, or at least going on a long hiatus, or other things you don't control, like them losing other relationships or losing their job has to happen, or losing a lot of money. It takes that. And even in the face of that, not all people with these personality styles get it. If you really are still wanting to gradually introduce this idea to them that there's this thing called narcissism, I guess there's a few things you could try. Maybe you watch a movie together that has a really narcissistic character and see if they connect the dots around that. I don't know if that's going to work, but it's worth a shot. Tell them about someone you both care about who may be enduring a narcissistic relationship and call it by its name there and see how they weigh in. The challenge, even for us as therapists, is that we cannot come in too fast with suggestions or insights. It's a gradual process where the narcissistic person has to be the one who believes they came up with the insight and not that someone else was the one who's sort of explaining all of this to them. It is challenging as hell because you may actually have a compassionate view of their narcissism. You may understand where it came from. You may understand how it shows up in them. You may understand why they get angry. But even if you understand all of that, you may not be able to bear up under it anymore. There is no compassionate way to walk in through that door and share it with them. Obviously, you know I'm always that idea of I'm a proponent of that thing called the tiger's cage, as long as it's not a relationship characterized by violence or danger, but that you walk in, you say your piece, and you see what comes back at you. Just make sure you have your therapist on speed dial afterwards. In some cases, when you go in the tiger's cage, you might be pleasantly surprised. And in a small percentage of cases, the narcissistic person may actually be ready to hear some of it. But life isn't a Hallmark movie, and it's not going to be a quick insight and big hugs, especially in the absence of a rock bottom. Even in therapy, bringing someone into awareness of their narcissistic personality is tricky business. If you are close to it, it is not easy. You may even do better to focus on what is bothering you about their behavior, how it affects you, and then setting a real boundary in response to it. They may call your bluff, throw out some contemptuous zingers, but ultimately you are speaking your truth and not analyzing their personality, which I think is the safer way to go. Anytime we communicate about how we feel about someone's behavior, our best approach is to stay focused on ourselves, how we feel. They may not care, but that's the only thing you can say with 100% certainty. It's the only truth we can hold on to. The key at those times is to not let yourself be gaslighted and acknowledge that if you do want to keep a relationship with a narcissistic person afloat, and try to make it a little bit easier, like this person was asking, it's tiny baby steps, patience, and a constant reminder to yourself that their toxic behavior is about them and not you. I know that a lot of you struggle with this particular issue. In the absence of the rock bottom, I don't really see an easy path forward. Thanks again.